Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be tackling a really popular parenting book, Peaceful Parent, Happy Kids by Dr. Laura Markham.
Yeah, this one's been on my list for a while. Excited to dig in.
And me too.
Yeah.
And, from what I've heard, it's not just like a surface level kind of parenting advice.
Right. It's not just like a quick tip kind of thing. It really seems to offer like a whole new framework for how we think about parenting and our relationship with our kids.
Totally. So it's broken down into 8 chapters, each one building on the last
Yeah.
to kind of create this like roadmap for a less stressful and more connected family life.
I love that. A roadmap. So, where do we even begin with a book like this?
Well, I think it's helpful to first get a sense of what each chapter covers, just a quick overview. So the foreword sets the stage, introduces Dr. Markham's core philosophy.
Gotcha. Sets the scene.
Exactly. Then chapter 2 is called How to Stop Yelling at Your Child. Super practical, gives you actual tools to understand why we yell and, even more importantly, how to stop.
Oh, I think every parent needs that chapter.
Right. Then chapter 3, Connection. The key to cooperation dives into the science of attachment and how it impacts kids.
Okay, so we're getting into some like deeper stuff there.
We are. Then it gets even better. Chapter 4, Raising a Child Who Wants to Behave, Dare Not to Discipline. This one really challenges some traditional ideas about discipline and presents a whole new way of thinking about it.
Ooh, that sounds juicy. I'm intrigued.
I know, right? Then we have chapter 5, Raising a Child Who Achieves with Joy and Self-Esteem, Mastery Coaching. This one's all about how to foster that genuine love of learning in our kids.
Love that. So important.
Definitely. Then think of chapter 6 as like your toolbox. It's called Action Guides, and it's packed with specific strategies to handle everyday parenting stuff.
Oh, that's the kind of stuff I need. Practical tips, right?
Exactly. The afterward, so chapter 7 kind of helps you figure out when you might need some extra support and also has a really reassuring message about the long-term benefits of this whole peaceful parenting approach.
I'm sensing a theme here of like being kind to yourself as a parent.
Totally. And then finally, chapter 8, Acknowledgements and Further Reading. Gives you some extra resources if you want to dive deeper.
Perfect. Okay, so we've got our roadmap. What struck you most when you first started reading? Anything jump out at you?
Oh, for sure. So right in the foreword, there's this story about the neighbor's kid accidentally mowing down a flower bed.
Oh, no.
Right. But it's not about the flower bed. It's really about how we as parents react in those moments. Like our reactions can either make things worse or create a chance for our kids to learn and grow.
Makes you think, right? Like, are we adding fuel to the fire or are we helping them navigate this situation?
Exactly. And that leads right into Dr. Markham's main point. Our own emotional regulation is the foundation of peaceful parenting. It's not about controlling our kids, it's about controlling ourselves.
So much easier said than done sometimes.
Totally. She admits that too. It's hard work. You have to change your mindset, deal with your own baggage, and respond with empathy instead of just reacting automatically.
Yeah, like we're not robots, right? We've got our own stuff going on.
Exactly. I think that's what I appreciate most about her approach. It's realistic. It's not about being perfect. It's about progress. Like, you're not going to magically transform into this Zen parent overnight.
That's reassuring. I mean, who has time for perfect anyway? So let's get into the practical stuff, shall we? What about that chapter on yelling? I'm guessing most parents can relate to that one.
Oh, yeah. How to stop yelling at your child. That's chapter 2. And I think what's really fascinating is that it's not about shaming parents who yell. She actually dives into the biology behind it. Like, why do we do it?
That's interesting. I always just assumed it was like a lack of self-control or something.
Right. Well, it turns out yelling isn't just about bad parenting. Our brains are actually wired to resort to yelling when we're stressed, especially if we were yelled at as kids.
Wow, so it's like a learned behavior, like our brains just default to it.
Exactly. It's like our survival mode kicking in. But the key is to become aware of those triggers. Like, what are the specific things that make us lose it?
Right, like is it bedtime or when they don't listen or when we're just already stressed out about something else?
Exactly. Once we know our triggers, then we can start developing coping mechanisms, like taking a deep breath, walking away for a minute, or using a calming phrase to de-escalate the situation.
I love that she gives us those practical tools. Like, what do we actually do in those moments?
Right. And what I found really helpful is that she emphasizes self-compassion. Like, we're not going to be perfect parents, and that's okay. We're going to yell sometimes, and that doesn't mean we're failures.
So much pressure to be perfect. Right. It's refreshing to hear an expert say it's okay to mess up.
Totally. It's about recognizing those moments, learning from them, and trying to do better next time. So speaking of connection, That leads us to a big point Dr. Markham makes. The role of attachment in a child's development. That's chapter 3.
Okay, attachment. I think I've heard that term before, but can you refresh my memory?
Sure. So it's all about building a strong, secure connection with your child, which sets the foundation for them to cooperate and trust you. And it's especially crucial during those early years, like infancy.
Gotcha. So how do we actually do that? Like, what are some things parents can do to foster that secure attachment?
Well, one example she gives is the importance of responding to your baby's cries. Babies cry for a reason, right? They're hungry, tired, or they need comfort. When you respond consistently, you're essentially teaching them that their needs matter and that you're there for them.
It makes sense. You're building that trust.
Exactly. It's not about spoiling them. It's about building that foundational trust.
And I think a lot of parents worry that if they're too responsive, they'll create a clingy or needy kid. Does she address that?
She does. She says secure attachment actually leads to more independence later on. When kids feel secure in their relationship with their parents, they're more likely to go out and explore the world with confidence.
That's so interesting. So it's like giving them a safe base camp to return to. Yeah.
Exactly. It's kind of counterintuitive, but it makes sense when you think about it. Now let's move on to chapter 4. Raising a child who wants to behave. Dare not to discipline.
Now, that title definitely caught my eye. It sounds like she's challenging some pretty traditional ideas about discipline.
Oh, she is. This chapter is a big one for a lot of parents. She basically argues that punishment methods, like timeouts, yelling, taking away your privileges, they might not be the most effective way to guide a child's behavior.
Whoa, okay. That's a big statement. I can already hear some parents out there thinking, but what about consequences? Won't my kid just run wild?
Yeah, it goes against what a lot of us were taught. But her approach is about understanding the needs and feelings behind a child's actions, especially when they're young.
So instead of punishing a kid for having a tantrum, we should try to figure out what caused it.
Exactly. Maybe they're tired, hungry, or overwhelmed. We need to see their behavior as communication, even if it's not the way we'd like them to communicate.
That makes so much sense. Okay, I'm really starting to see how this peaceful parenting thing works. So what are some examples of how we can deal with challenging behavior without resorting to punishment?
Well, she talks a lot about setting clear limits and boundaries, but doing it with empathy, like explaining why certain behaviors aren't okay and helping them find more appropriate ways to express their needs.
Okay, so it's not about letting them do whatever they want, it's about guiding them.
Exactly. And she talks about redirection, offering choices, and using natural consequences.
I'm intrigued. I definitely want to hear more about those strategies, but I think we've covered a lot of ground for one sitting.
We have. So let's take a quick break and come back to dive into those specific techniques and how we can apply them in our own lives.
Sounds good to me. Looking forward to it.
All right, so we've talked about why we yell and the importance of connection. Now let's get to those specific strategies Dr. Markham recommends for handling tough moments, without resorting to yelling or punishment.
Yeah, because theory's great, but what do we actually do?
Right. Well, chapter 6 is like a whole toolbox. It's called Action Guides. One that really stood out to me was natural consequences.
Okay, I've heard of that, but it can be a little tricky, right? Like, how does it work?
It's basically about letting kids experience the natural outcomes of their actions. Of course, only when it's safe, right? But let's say your kid refuses to wear a coat on a chilly day. Instead of like battling it out or giving in, you let them go outside without the coat and feel that natural consequence of being cold.
You're not trying to punish them, it's just life happens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Dr. Markham says this actually helps them learn responsibility,
Yeah.
Make more thoughtful choices next time.
Interesting. So what about when they're like in the middle of something and they just won't move on? Transitions.
Oh, transitions. Yeah, those can be tough. But she talks about redirection, which I find works really well, especially with younger kids.
Oh, redirection. I think I do that instinctively sometimes. Like if they're throwing toys, I might be like, hey, let's build a tower instead.
Yeah. It's all about gently shifting their attention to something else. Make it fun, Kids love that one-on-one attention.
It's true. And sometimes it's easier to distract them than to get into a whole power struggle.
Totally. And she also talks a lot about giving kids choices whenever possible.
Ah, choices. I like that. Makes them feel more in control.
Exactly. So instead of like put on your shoes, it's more like, do you want to wear the red shoes or the blue shoes?
It's so simple, but it just changes the whole dynamic.
It does. Now, I know we can't avoid this one, tantrums. Dr. Markham has some pretty insightful things to say about those, right?
Oh, tantrums, the universal parenting experience.
Right. And what I appreciate is that she doesn't frame it as like bad behavior. She says tantrums are totally normal. It's just kids being overwhelmed by big emotions, emotions they don't know how to handle yet.
That's a good way to look at it. So it's not about stopping the emotions, it's about helping them through it.
Exactly. So offering empathy, like I know you're really upset,
Yeah.
validating their feelings,
Yeah.
and then helping them find ways to calm down.
So it's like it's okay to feel this way, but let's figure out how to deal with it.
Exactly. Now, this might sound like a lot of work, right? And I know some parents might worry that it's too permissive,
Yeah, like you're just letting them get away with anything.
but Dr. Markham's very clear. Peaceful parenting isn't about that. It's about setting limits, but doing it with empathy, teaching them to make responsible choices, not just because they're afraid of getting punished.
Okay, that makes sense. But it's a long game, right? Like it takes time and consistency to see the results.
It does. She's very upfront about that. This isn't like a quick fix. It's a journey. There will be days when we yell, we lose it, we feel like we're failing.
Ah, that's comforting to hear. Like no one's expecting us to be perfect.
Exactly. It's about recognizing those moments, learning from them, and trying again next time, and being kind to ourselves in the process.
Yeah, self-compassion, that's a big part of this, isn't it?
It is. So now let's talk about Chapter 5. It's called Raising a Child Who Achieves with Joy and Self-Esteem, Mastery Coaching.
Ooh, that sounds interesting. A lot of parents, myself included, I think we get so caught up in grades and accomplishments.
It's easy to do, but she encourages us to shift our focus from external rewards to like nurturing their intrinsic motivation to learn.
Intrinsic motivation. So, like, they want to learn, not just because they have to.
Exactly. And it's about fostering a growth mindset. Challenges are opportunities to learn. Mistakes are just part of the process.
I love that. So it's not about being perfect. It's about the journey of learning.
Exactly. So instead of pushing your kid to get an A, you're encouraging them to enjoy the learning itself. Like,
Yeah.
hey, let's figure this out together.
It makes a big difference when they see it as fun, right?
Huge difference.
Yeah.
And she argues that when kids are intrinsically motivated, they're more likely to try hard, embrace challenges,
Yeah.
develop that sense of competence.
Which is what we all want for them, right? To be confident and resilient.
Exactly. But here's the catch. We have to model that growth mindset ourselves.
Oh, right. Like, we can't just tell them to do it. We have to show them.
Exactly. So if we're learning something new or struggling with something, we should talk to our kids about it. Show them it's okay to not know everything.
That's a good reminder. Lead by example. Okay, so now what about chapter 6? We talked about it being like a toolbox. What are some of the actual tools?
Oh, there are so many. But one that I think will resonate with a lot of listeners is about creating a no-blame household.
Ooh, no blame. That sounds peaceful already.
Right. Blame, it just creates defensiveness and resentment. It makes it hard to communicate. She says instead of blaming, we should focus on problem solving.
So instead of who made this mess, it's more like, okay, how do we clean this up together?
Exactly. Makes the kid feel like they're part of the solution, not the problem. And it teaches responsibility too.
I like that. So it's not about finding a culprit. It's about working together.
Right. And she gives really concrete examples, like what to do if your kid spills juice on the rug. It's not about lecturing. It's about taking a breath, acknowledging their feelings like, oh, it looks like you had an accident, and then cleaning it up together.
It takes the stress out of those situations. And you know what? It models problem solving for them too.
Absolutely. So then there's another action guide on fostering responsibility.
That's a big one, right? Like, how do we get them to help out without nagging them constantly?
Well, she talks about involving kids in chores from a young age. Even toddlers can help with simple things, like picking up toys or putting clothes in the hamper.
It's good to get them into the habit early on. Makes it feel normal.
Exactly. And again, choices. Instead of dictating, do the dishes, it's more like, would you like to set the table or help with the dishes?
It gives them that sense of ownership, right?
It does. And then when they do follow through, we need to acknowledge their effort. A simple thank you goes a long way.
That positive reinforcement, it makes a big difference. Okay, so we've talked about chores, but what about homework? That's a whole other battle sometimes.
Oh yeah, homework. But she has this whole section called Homework Without Tears. And she recommends creating a consistent routine, like same time, same place every day.
That helps them get into the groove. Fewer distractions, right?
Right. And she says to create a distraction-free environment. So no TV, video games, phones.
Easier said than done these days.
It is. But it teaches them focus and time management too.
Okay, so consistency and minimizing distractions. That makes sense. But what if they're just really struggling with the subject? Like, do we just leave them to figure it out on their own?
That's where it gets tricky, right? We want to support them, but not do the work for them. She suggests things like breaking down the assignment into smaller chunks, helping them find resources, offering encouragement.
So, like being a coach, not a crutch.
Exactly. And remember, every kid's different. What works for one might not work for another.
Right, like learning styles and all of that. Okay, so what about helping them make good decisions? I feel like that's a huge part of parenting, especially as they get older.
It is. And she has this action guide on developing good judgment. It's about finding that balance between giving advice and giving them space to make their own choices.
Ooh, that's tough. Like, we want to protect them, but we also have to let them learn from their own experiences.
Exactly. So we can talk through different options, help them weigh the pros and cons, share our own experiences, but ultimately, they have to make the call.
And then we have to bite our tongues and not say, I told you so, when it doesn't go well.
Exactly. Instead of blame, it's about empathy. Like, I know this is tough. How are you feeling? And then helping them process it, learn from it. Like, what do you think you could do differently next time?
So turning those mistakes into learning opportunities.
Exactly. That's a big part of peaceful parenting. It's not about controlling them. It's about empowering them to be independent thinkers, problem solvers.
Okay, I know we're covering a lot here, but those action guides are just a small part of the practical advice she gives in the book.
It's amazing how many different aspects of parenting she covers. But it all comes back to those core principles: connection, empathy, respect. It does. And what's really cool is that she doesn't just focus on how we interact with our kids. She also talks a lot about the work we need to do on ourselves.
Ooh, that's interesting. So, like, our own baggage, our own issues from childhood, they can affect how we parent.
Absolutely. She says our unresolved stuff can trigger us to react in ways we later regret.
Oh, yeah. I've definitely caught myself reacting to my kids in ways that, like, mirror how my own parents reacted.
It's so common. And that's why she stresses the importance of doing our own inner work, reflecting on our own experiences and how they might be influencing us now.
Makes sense. But it can be hard to face that stuff, right?
It can be, and it's a process. But therapy can be really helpful. There are also books, workshops that focus on self-reflection, emotional regulation.
Okay, so there are resources to help us with that inner work.
There are even simple things like journaling, mindfulness. They can make a big difference.
It's about becoming more aware of our emotions and how they're impacting our behavior.
Exactly. So we can learn to pause, choose a different response.
And when we do that, it not only benefits us, it benefits our kids too.
Totally. Okay, so let's get real here. Tantrums. How does peaceful parenting actually play out when your kid's having a meltdown?
Right, because those can be intense.
They can. And it's easy to get caught in that power struggle, try
Mhm.
to control them, shut down their emotions. But Dr. Markham says, remember, tantrums are usually a sign that they're overwhelmed, right? Big feelings they don't know how to handle.
So it's not about stopping the tantrum, it's about supporting them through it.
Exactly. Offering empathy, I know you're really upset, validating those feelings, helping them find ways to calm down.
So, like giving them the tools to manage those big emotions.
Right. And remembering that tantrums are normal. All kids have them.
It's not a reflection on us as parents.
Exactly. So what about sibling rivalry? That's another one that can really test your patience.
Oh, yeah. My kids are constantly at each other's throats.
It's so common, and it can be tough to manage. But one of the key things Dr. Markham says is to avoid comparisons.
Ah, so no, why can't you be more like your brother?
Exactly. Comparisons just fuel that competition. It
Yeah.
makes them feel bad about themselves.
So how do we handle it then?
Well, she says to focus on each child's unique strengths. Celebrate what makes them special. And create opportunities for them to cooperate, like working on a project together, helping with a chore.
So turning it into a team effort.
Exactly. And when they do cooperate, we need to acknowledge that, wow, you guys are a great team.
That positive reinforcement goes a long way.
It does.
Hmm.
Okay, so let's talk about school. That can be a whole other source of stress for kids and for parents.
Oh, for sure. It's a big transition, especially for little ones.
It is. And Dr. Markham emphasizes the importance of building a connection with the teacher, going to school events, communicating regularly, volunteering if you can.
It shows your kid you're invested in their education.
Exactly. And then when they do face challenges, whether it's academic, social, whatever, we need to be there to listen and support them.
So like helping with homework, talking through social problems, being their advocate.
Exactly. But it's not about fixing everything for them. It's about empowering them to find their own solutions.
Right. We want them to be resilient, figure things out on their own. Okay, so what about screen time? That's a big one these days.
It is, and it's tough to find that balance right. She recommends setting clear limits.
So, like designated times for screens, designated times for other activities.
Exactly. And be consistent with those limits.
Yeah.
Also, be mindful of the content they're consuming.
Make sure it's age appropriate, not too violent or anything like that.
Right. And whenever possible, encourage them to do things that don't involve screens, like playing outside, reading, art projects, spending time with friends.
Those are the things that build their imaginations and social skills. Okay, so now let's talk about discipline, or as Dr. Markham calls it, guidance.
Right. It's about moving away from punishment and embracing a more understanding approach.
So instead of yelling or timeouts, what do we do?
Well, she suggests seeing misbehavior as an opportunity for connection and teaching.
Interesting. So, like a chance to understand what's going on with them.
Exactly. We listen empathetically, validate their feelings,
Yeah.
and help them find healthier ways to express themselves.
So, like, if they're hitting their sibling, instead of just saying no hitting,
Yeah.
we try to figure out why they're so angry.
Exactly. And we can help them find a different way to express that anger. Like, it's okay to be mad, but we don't hit. Maybe you can stomp your feet, punch a pillow, draw an angry picture.
It's giving them those coping skills, right?
Exactly. And it's not about letting them get away with it. It's about helping them learn and grow.
And it builds that connection because it's based on respect and understanding. Okay, I'm really starting to see how this all ties together. But can we get into some more specific strategies? Like, what are some things we can actually do in those challenging moments?
Okay, well, one strategy Dr. Markham talks about a lot is redirection. We touched on this before, but it's about gently shifting their attention away from the unwanted behavior and towards something more acceptable.
So, like, if they're throwing toys, we might redirect them to building a tower or playing with Play-Doh.
Exactly. And it helps if we join in, make it fun. That connection can really de-escalate things.
It's true. And she also talks a lot about offering choices.
Choices are huge. Kids are much more likely to cooperate when they feel like they have some say in things.
So, like, instead of put on your shoes,
Yeah,
it's which shoes do you want to wear?
exactly. Give them that sense of autonomy.
Okay, what about natural consequences? We talked about that earlier with the code example. Are there other ways we can use that strategy?
Sure. It's about letting them experience the natural outcomes of their actions, as long as it's safe, of course. So, for example, if they don't put their toys away, maybe those toys get put away in a special spot for a while.
Ah, so they learn that their actions have consequences.
Exactly. And it's not us punishing them, it's just natural consequences.
I like that. Okay, so we've talked a lot about what we do for our kids, but what about taking care of ourselves? I know that can be tough as a parent.
Oh, it's so important. We can't pour from an empty cup, right? Dr. Markham actually devotes a whole section to self-care.
What kind of stuff does she recommend?
The basics, actually.
Yeah.
Getting enough sleep, eating healthy, exercising, and then also making time for things we enjoy.
Yeah. Easy to say, harder to do.
It is, but it's crucial. And she also emphasizes connecting with other adults, whether it's through friendships, support groups, even therapy.
It helps to know you're not alone in this.
Totally. It's about refilling our own cups so we can be there for our kids. Okay, this is a big one. How do we deal with our own difficult emotions as parents?
Ooh, yeah. Parenting can be an emotional roller coaster.
It is. We feel it all. Joy, love, frustration, anger, guilt. And sometimes those negative emotions can take over.
So what do we do when we're feeling those big feelings?
She talks about self-awareness and emotional regulation. First step is to figure out what our triggers are. What sets us off.
So is it the whining, the back talk, certain situations that remind us of our own childhood?
Could be any of those things.
Hmm.
And once we know our triggers, we can start developing strategies like deep breathing, mindfulness, even just taking a break from the situation.
Learning to pause before we react so we can choose a different response.
Exactly. And being kind to ourselves when we do mess up.
Because we all will, right?
We all will. Okay, another big topic. Setting limits. That's a crucial part of parenting, right?
Yeah, it helps kids feel safe, know what to expect. But how do we do it without being all authoritarian?
Well, she stresses being clear and consistent with the limits. So kids know what the boundaries are, there's no confusion.
No mixed messages.
Right. And when we set a limit, we state it calmly, firmly, no yelling, no threats.
Okay, so assertive but not aggressive.
Exactly. And keep it simple. No long lectures, kids tune those out. And another thing she recommends is involving kids in the process whenever possible.
So like family meetings to talk about rules.
Exactly. It gives them a sense of ownership, makes them more likely to cooperate, and it teaches them valuable skills like communication, problem solving.
That makes a lot of sense. But what about when they test those limits? Like they push back?
Well, the key is to respond calmly and consistently. Don't give in just to avoid a tantrum. Don't change the rules based on your mood.
That just teaches them that they can manipulate us, right?
It does. So we calmly restake the limit, offer redirection or a choice. Like, I know you want to watch TV, but it's not screen time until after dinner. Would you like to play a game or read a book instead?
Give them an alternative. So you're not just shutting them down, you're guiding them.
Oh, okay. I think that's super helpful. Now, transitions. Any tips for making this go smoother? Oh, transitions. Those are tough. But she says the first step is understanding why transitions are hard for kids.
I mean, they're just going from one thing to another. Why is it such a big deal?
Well, for little kids, transitions can feel like a loss of control. They're in the middle of something and suddenly they have to stop. And their sense of time is different, so 5 minutes can feel like forever.
Ah, okay. So it's about being patient and understanding.
Exactly. So we give them plenty of warning, like, we're leaving in 5 minutes, and then gentle reminders as the time gets closer.
And what about those times when they just absolutely refuse to move?
Well, we can try making it fun. Sing a cleanup song, make up a silly rhyme about getting dressed, and if they're still resisting, offer a choice. Do you want to walk to the car or ride on my shoulders?
Ah, choices again. Okay, I'm seeing a theme here. So, can we talk about anger? I think that's something a lot of parents struggle with.
It is, and it can be scary, right? Both for us and for our kids. We feel like we're not supposed to get angry, like it makes us bad parents.
I know, I felt that way. But Dr. Markham says anger is a natural emotion. It's okay to feel it.
Exactly. It's how we express it that matters. And that's where peaceful parenting comes in. Instead of yelling or lashing out, we teach our kids healthy ways to deal with anger.
So, like using words to express their feelings, I'm so mad, or physical outlets like running around punching a pillow.
Exactly. And it's important that we model that healthy anger management ourselves. Kids learn by watching us.
So, if we're constantly yelling, they're going to think that that's how you deal with anger.
Right. So when we're angry, we need to take a step back, calm ourselves down, and then address the situation in a calm and respectful way. Okay, now let's talk about trust.
Trust is huge in any relationship, especially with our kids.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it can be so fragile. So how do we build that trust?
I mean, it seems like a lot of what we've been talking about already plays into that.
It does. Consistency is key.
Right.
We do what we say we're going to do. We enforce the limits we set.
So they know they can count on us.
Right. And being honest.
Yeah.
Even when it's hard. Like if we make a mistake, we own up to it, apologize. If we don't know something, we admit it.
That shows them we respect them enough to be truthful with them.
Exactly. Okay, so now a true when lying. It's so common in kids, but it can be really upsetting for parents.
It feels like a betrayal, almost.
It can. But Dr. Markham says instead of getting angry or accusing them of being a liar, we should try to understand why they felt the need to lie. It's like, get curious, not furious.
Exactly. Instead of punishment, it's about teaching, helping them understand why honesty is so important.
And why it's okay to make mistakes.
Yeah, like we're not expecting them to be perfect.
Right. We're all human and we all mess up. So speaking of not being perfect, Dr. Markham talks a lot about self-esteem, like how important it is for kids to feel good about themselves.
Whoa, self-esteem's huge. It affects everything. Their confidence, how they see themselves, how they handle challenges.
Totally. But it doesn't just appear out of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
It's something we have to nurture.
Right. So how do we do that? Like, how do we help our kids build that strong sense of self-worth?
Well, she says one of the most important things is unconditional love and acceptance. Like letting them know that we love them no matter what,
Even when they mess up.
especially when they mess up,
Yeah.
because that's when they need it the most.
Makes sense. So it's
What?
like that love is a constant no matter what they do.
Exactly. It gives them that secure base to go out and explore the world, try new things, even fail sometimes.
And knowing that we've got their back no matter what.
Right. So besides just expressing our love, are there other things we can do? Like specific actions to build their self-esteem?
She talks a lot about encouraging them to pursue their passions, like finding things they enjoy, things they're good at.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like helping them discover their own unique talents,
Exactly. And then recognizing their effort and celebrating their accomplishments along the way.
not just waiting for them to reach some end goal.
Right. Like if they're working hard on a drawing, we acknowledge their effort, even if the drawing isn't perfect.
And that teaches them that it's the trying that counts.
Yeah, and that their worth isn't tied to being perfect. Which is a good segue into the next point. She actually talks about the downsides of perfectionism
Oh, yeah. We often think of perfectionism as a good thing, but it can really backfire.
because it sets them up to feel like they're never good enough.
Exactly. So how do we help them develop a healthier view of success and failure?
She says to focus on effort and progress, not just the outcome.
So like praising their hard work even if they didn't win the game or get an A on the test.
Right, and helping them see mistakes as opportunities to learn and grow. Like if they spill their milk, it's not the end of the world. It's a chance to learn how to clean it up.
I love that. It's about teaching them resilience.
Yeah.
Okay, so as we wrap up our deep dive into peaceful parent, happy kids, what are some of the key takeaways?
Well, for me, it's really about shifting our mindset as parents.
From controlling to connecting.
Exactly. And remembering that it's a journey, not a destination.
We're going to make mistakes.
We're going to lose our patience sometimes.
We're going to have days when we feel like we're failing.
But that's okay. We're all human.
The important thing is to keep learning and growing.
And keep trying to connect with our kids.
Because at the end of the day, that's what matters most. The love, the connection, the bond we share with our children. So, if you're interested in learning more about peaceful parenting, we highly recommend checking out Dr. Laura Markham's book, Peaceful Parent, Happy Kids: How to Stop Yelling and Start Connecting.
It's packed with so many great insights and practical strategies.
And we'll be sure to include links to our website and other helpful resources in the show notes.
We'd love to hear from you. What resonated with you from today's deep dive?
What are some of your biggest parenting challenges? Share your thoughts in the comments below.
And if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the world of parenting.
We're always looking for suggestions for books to explore, so let us know what you'd like to hear about next. Until next time, happy parenting.